Do you have education goals for your children? When I first started homeschooling, our goal, truthfully, was to get to Christmas. And then once we reached that, the goal was to get to the end of the year. I quickly realized as I was overwhelmed with choices and decisions to make, confused many times, that that probably wasn't the best way to plan our homeschooling. I realized the importance of determining education goals and writing them down. But maybe that's where you are right now, not having education goals for your children. When people ask, can you easily answer why you homeschool? People do ask. And the answer that you have for why you're homeschooling also brings lots of freedom and just that clarity of mind when making decisions. Are you overwhelmed when you're choosing your curriculums and activities for your children throughout the year? I definitely was. And that's why I'm really excited about today's conversation. And you're going to enjoy it. How to gain more freedom by setting education goals for each of your children. My name is Diana Rolston, and I want to welcome you to Spark Homeschool Parent. I strive to create an encouraging and non-judgmental community where we can openly share our fears and our questions, our doubts about homeschooling. So every week I bring conversations about these fears and questions just to bring clarity to your home education journey. This conversation today is for you if you haven't set uh, education goals for your children. We're going to be talking about that. This conversation is for you if you're not sure why you homeschool, or you have it in your mind, you have an idea of why you homeschool, but you haven't written it down, made it succinct, and you find yourself changing direction many times throughout the homeschool year. This conversation is for you if you're looking for freedom, away from the confusion, away from that sense of being overwhelmed with all the choices that you have. This is the conversation that you're going to enjoy. Educating our children at home is an important responsibility that really can't be taken lightly. Rachel Halldorson, who's my guest today, she'll show how setting her children's education goals freed her from confusion and a feeling of being overwhelmed. By doing this before each school year began, she found that she had more time for things that her family really enjoyed doing. I want to welcome you again to Spark Homeschool Parent. Thank you for joining. And if you are homeschooling, no doubt you know another family, another parent who would benefit from the conversations that we have here. So I want to encourage you to share the group, Spark Homeschool Parent, share the Facebook Lives with other families that you know would benefit from them. I'm sure they'd be appreciative of that, and I would appreciate that also. So thank you. And as you're joining, I'm going to put my comments on. I would love you just to let me know how you're engaging with the conversation that we're having. And just send a quick hi, post your questions as they come up. Again, we're talking about how to gain more freedom by setting education goals for each of your children. The guest that I have the pleasure of introducing and being in conversation with today is a mom of 2 homeschool graduates. Her son is now at college in the US. Her daughter is attending high school. And she has left the great north to live now in Mount Pleasant, Texas with her husband. And she loves and always has loved reading and writing. And since not homeschooling her children anymore, she's become IEW certified. That's Institute for Excellence in Writing. And she shares that love of reading and writing as an English teacher in the home education environment down in Texas. She's also an epicure host who shows love by providing amazing meals. And I have been the benefit of that too. I want to welcome Rachel Halldorson. I'll bring her in here. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of homeschooling alongside each other for many years when you were living up here. And I know I've shared this with you, always considered you a wise friend. So I'm really excited that you're here. I think it'll become apparent to those that are listening very quickly. And I can't remember when on my homeschool journey we met each other. If it was in those first couple years when I was.
I think it was. I I seem to remember that at the art class that we had our boy,
Oh,
or was it North Gore? And
yes.
yes, and
Wow.
yeah. So what would that have been the early days for you? That first year, maybe?
That was the early days. That's when I was saying in my introduction that I didn't really have a clear sense
Yeah.
of what our goals, our big goals were, the big picture, which, as we're going to be talking about today, affects what we do each year. Yeah, I was like confused. I remember that was a difficult time for me. And but things got better, and we became great friends through it. So this this conversation about education goals may be new to some of our listeners. So I'm excited to share that. You say that it's important to have a big picture of
Mhm.
educating our children at home. Can you share your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Instead of hitting the ground running and going right for what are we doing today, um, I just found worth my time and effort to take um, take going into school year, summer, um, to see the big picture and what are our goals for end of the day. In 18 years when they're adults and they're ready to move on, or at whatever age they're out of our what do we want for them? What do we want them to know? Practically, what kind of how do what do we value and what do we want to pass on to our kids? So all that was really worth. I would always try to challenge myself to read one new homeschool whatever book every summer, different perspective, because there are so many different what spoke to us, what spoke to our family person. So yeah, coming up with that big picture was huge for me, and then from there, I would narrow down that funnel.
Yeah. Um, Unfortunately, the internet is cutting in and out. So I'll just summarize quickly, and then we can share a little bit more about that big picture of like what thoughts, what dreams do we have for our children when they leave the house? For some of us, yeah, they're 15, 16, 18, 25, whatever it is, but it's those character traits that we want them to have, the skills that we want them to have. Um, what were some of the specific things that you were thinking in that big picture?
Yeah, well, the first thing I wanted to answer, was what do you believe that is, that's that's the big question. And so we believe that education is the preparation of a child intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and physically for life and for eternity. So that
Um,
so yeah, so that from there, if that's what education means to us, then we need to pay attention to what are they learning intellectually this year? How are we developing them emotionally? Um, we want to pay attention to that spiritual foundation, and then what are we doing to maintain a healthy physical lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. That was very succinct too. That's like just a great example of when we write it down rather than just having all these random thoughts come and go, but having parameters. And then, yeah, you say we start at that big picture, and then it narrows down. What do you say is the next step?
Yeah. So from there, then it would be okay. So what are the subjects, if you will, not just academically, but in general, that are our priorities, and for us, and I call it the foundation, and that would be spiritual foundation. So that would be found our devotional time, Bible history lessons, certain information classes at church, are just regular worship. That's and then that's our number one priority, and that's what we want in our schedule on a regular basis. Then comes the 3 R's: the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Of course, along with other things too, but those really are the basics of. We wanted to make sure that those are done earlier in the day, um, as a priority, as opposed to later in the day when we're all tired and nobody wants to do math. So, and then the next level of priority, I guess, for us was communication skills, because I don't think I can say a whole lot about how that might be lacking today, but just basic spelling, writing. We would do that through narrating and teaching our kids how to critically think. So that would be the next step. Then, what are our priorities?
Mm-hmm. And important to realize, like, those are great and perfectly suited to your family. And it is a process that every family has to figure it out for themselves, what those priorities are.
Yeah,
A mutual friend that I interviewed a few months ago, she, in her family, had the 3 M's. She had movement, music, and math. You know who that was? But for that family, that was their priorities. But and then you can see how when you have the foundation and then the 3 R's as your priorities and communication, um, how did that practically play out when you chose curriculums and different activities that bombard us throughout the year?
absolutely. Yes. So I started making up then. I mean, we all have only 24 hours in one day, and nor did I want to so pack our days that we didn't have any room for margin. So that's where absolutely writing it down for me was key, so that I could visually see what I was, um, suggesting our school year was going to look like, and does it even make sense? And
Mm.
really, about how long will this take me to do, or for us to do? And so uh, I would pop into a schedule then the things that for sure what we were going to do, and those that were set at a certain time. So if I knew that that swimming was going to be at 2 o'clock every Tuesday, then that goes in the calendar, and we work around that. So those things that have a set time that we need to do that, those go in first. Um, and then everything else can go around it. Again, going back to the priorities, our mornings were basically, academic. That's so picking out curriculum, that really is a whole other conversation, I think. But all I can say is, um, knowing what our priorities were and what our mission was did help through the the curriculum out there, because there is so much overwhelming. But if I know that I really value the Charlotte Mason method of learning in the early years, and that I want a curriculum that is open to those philosophies, then that helps me narrow down my choices right there when it comes to language arts. Um, So that would.
Yeah, that's a conversation actually that I'm going to be having next week is choosing curriculum. And yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking about, you said swimming. When you put that in, whatever, Tuesday afternoon, you can see also when you put everything into a calendar, just even when you're thinking about different activities, if you then put in art class on Wednesdays and something else on Thursdays and soccer's on Friday and something else is on Tuesday morning, and then you look at your schedule and you actually don't have time for those things that you said were most important, those foundations.
Yes. Yeah. And so that did mean saying no to them, or not right now. You know, I think we had talked earlier about how, oh yeah, for instance, you know, some physical, you know, extracurricular activities that our kids were in every given year was karate, swimming, gymnastics, soccer, skiing, ice skating, you know, but that it wasn't in one day that we did all these, and it wasn't even in one week, and it wasn't even in one month. So when I say that, you know, I write it down on paper, like these are all the physical activities that our kids are in, but that's spread over the school year. And then I can see too, we're taking advantage of the seasons. I mean, if you're going to live up north and it's going to be cold and snow, you might as well ski in it, you know? And so things like that, that I could, again, visually see that there was variety. It was over the course of the school year. And it just made sure that there was regular opportunity for our kids to be physically. That was it. Yeah. And then even academic arts was another area where that would be violin lessons, art classes, music lessons. But again, this wasn't all in one week. Like, this wasn't every week. My kids were in cooking classes once a month. Still on the books and to work around that, because if I wouldn't have put it in school, it wouldn't happen, or it would be less.
Yeah, that's great. And then I'm thinking also when we have that big picture of, yeah, that we want our children to be able to live on their own. That's where the cooking comes in, and the finance, or what other things that you've written down as important. And we fit them in when, sometime throughout the many years that we're educating our children at home. Like you say, it's not something that we fill our every week. They're doing everything. We all have rough patches in our home education journey. We all have rough patches in life in general, but this is why it's important to know why we homeschool. We can quickly get derailed when we have doubts and fears, questions flood into our minds. Why did you homeschool? How did you answer that question when people asked, why do you homeschool?
Well, if I believe that education is the preparation of a child intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, physically for life eternity, that's how I define it, then the next step is to say, we do better. That you know, and that's not bashing anyone else's choices, because they may define education differently, and they think that this other way will work for them just fine. For us, we can't. If we believe that that's education, then we just believed that we were the ones that were going to be the best to do it, and that was it. And it helped then, knowing our why and just convicted of it, that for when those days that were super rough, bus stop right outside our front. I mean, there were days I was looking at the bus saying, wait for my kid. But again, because, you know, and if I had to go look at what I wrote down just to find myself, then there it was. Okay, this is why, and we for a little longer.
Yeah. And this is just a small bump when you look at the big picture. You also said something really important, that you need to be convicted of it. So it's not, I mean, your mission statement or your definition of education sounds amazing, but I'm not encouraging other people to take that on as their own, but to create their own, so that they completely are convicted of that, because that's what's important when things get tough.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're cutting out a little bit, but this has been a fantastic conversation, Rachel, and I really appreciate you joining me. And there is just one last thing. In our title, we had that this brings freedom. For some people who don't like planning, who don't like filling in their calendar like you and I do, and seeing what is in the year ahead, this may just feel like another task that seems really overwhelming. But for you and for me, we found that going through this process of defining our big goals, creating our why, and then using that to plan the school year ahead really did give us more freedom. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, when I did put the work into it, and our days were just more likely to be predictable, and there's something about, I think most kids do respond to knowing what is expected of them, that they know what the expectations are. They know that um, this this and that there is free time coming up. And so that was beneficial for them as much as it was for me.
Mm-hmm. And like you said earlier too, we leave some time for flexibility. It's not like we're planning our whole day from 8 o'clock till 5 in the afternoon. We can actually like plan that downtime in there too. And yeah, we all benefit from structure and anticipating what's to come ahead. So that's a very important point also. Thank you again, Rachel. It's been great seeing you again, and I appreciate the conversation.
I'm just so sad about the internet. I'm sorry. We live in the country.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do. That's awesome. So thanks again for joining. I hope that has been helpful and encouraging for many of you listening. At Spark Homeschool Parent, I'm committed to providing an encouraging and non-judgmental community where we're going to talk about our questions and our fears and our doubts about homeschooling. And I'll be here again next Friday, 1 p.m., and every Friday with another Facebook Live. And remember that as homeschoolers, we can help our children find that spark that ignites their learning. Thanks again for joining.